I want to talk to you today a little bit about predictable irrationality. And my interest in irrational behavior started many years ago in hospital. I was burned very badly. And if you spend a lot of time in hospital, you'll see a lot of types of irrationalities. And the one that particularly bothered me in the burn department was the process by which the nurses took the bandage off me. Now, you must have all taken a Band-Aid off at some point, and you must have wondered what's the right approach. Do you rip it off quickly, short duration but high intensity, or do you take your Band-Aid off slowly? You take a long time, but each second is not as painful. Which one of those is the right approach? The nurses in my department thought that the right approach was the ripping one. So they would grab hold, and they would rip, and they would grab hold, and they would rip. And because I had 70% of my body burned, it would take about an hour. And as you can imagine, I hated that moment of ripping with incredible intensity. And I would try to reason with them and say, why don't we try something else? Why don't we take it a little longer, maybe 2 hours instead of an hour, and have less of this intensity? And the nurses told me two things. They told me that they had the right model of the patient, that they knew what was the right thing to do to minimize my pain. And they also told me that the word patient doesn't mean to make suggestions or interfere or... This is not just in Hebrew, by the way, it's in every language I've had experience with so far. And you know, there wasn't much I could do, and they kept on doing what they were doing. And about 3 years later, when I left the hospital, I started studying at the university. And one of the most interesting lessons I learned was that there is an experimental method, that if you have a question, you can create a replica of this question in some abstract way, and you can try to examine this question and maybe learn something about the world. So that's what I did. I was still interested in this question of how do you take bandages of burn patients. So originally I didn't have much money, so I went to a hardware store and I bought a carpenter's vise, and I would bring people to the lab, and I would put their finger in it, and I would crunch it a little bit. And I would crunch it for long periods and short periods, and pain it went up and pain it went down, and with breaks and without breaks, all kinds of versions of pain. And when I finished hurting people a little bit, I would ask them, so how painful was this? Or how painful was this? Or if you had to choose between the last two, which one would you choose? I kept on doing this for a while. And then, like all good academic projects, I got more funding. I moved to sounds, electrical shocks. I even had a pain suit that I could get people to feel much more pain. But at the end of this process, what I learned was that the nurses were wrong. Here were wonderful people with good intentions and plenty of experience, and nevertheless, they were getting things wrong predictably all the time. It turns out that because we don't encode duration in the way that we encode intensity, I would have had less pain if the duration would have been longer and the intensity was lower. It turns out it would have been better to start with my face, which was much more painful, and move toward my legs, giving me a trend of improvement over time that would have been also less painful. And it also turns out it would have been good to give me breaks in the middle to kind of recuperate from the pain. All of these would have been great things to do, and my nurses had no idea. And from that point on, I started thinking, are the nurses the only people in the world who get things wrong in this particular decision, or is it a more general case? And it turns out it's a more general case. There's a lot of mistakes we do.